Morning. Chapter 21. Arthur held on to it as best he could, with his hand clutching Tycho's fur as the thought wars ran. After a minute, Tycho was in his thoughts, telling Arthur to relax and feel Tycho's movements. Although it was difficult at first, Arthur began to read the landscape ahead with Tycho, leaning into turns and bracing for leaps. After a while they became one. Glimpses of Parenthna wove through the treetops as they darted between pines. She flew ahead or above the pack, but keeping low so as not to risk being seen by the victorious. They rode through the day into the short night, covering 50 miles in one day. The thought wars hardly paused for breath, relentless thud and thrust of their huge paws sending flurries of snow dust in their wake. As the short night drew in and the sky darkened to indigo, the temperature dropped and large flakes of snow tumbled between the pines. Arthur was glad of being able to sink his hands deep into Tycho's fur and share the warmth of his body. The rhythmic pace of the thought wolf began to make him tired. He couldn't even remember when he'd last slept. Rest, Tycho thought, and the pack slowed and stopped. The humans climbed down from their thought walls and stretched out their limbs. Now stationary, the snow soon settled on their fur hoods and eyelids. Tycho dug snow from the bottom of the nearby trees as though looking for something. He settled on a great old pine on the edge of a slope, with much of its roots exposed. Tycho deftly dug out any snow and earth with the other wolves to form an entrance and widen the cavity underneath, while Arthur, Maudie and Harriet collected needle branches to make a canopy roof. Felicity started a small fire, then went deeper into the undergrowth with her wolf, Kinnapak, who was digging and snouting through the dense vegetation. They had soon gathered a small pile of grubs to cook. Arthur felt so hungry he didn't even question what they were eating, but Felicity had an extraordinary ability to turn the most unappetizing food into a banquet with a sprinkle of herbs and spices she had brought along in small vials. The wolves liked their grubs raw and couldn't see the point of ruining them with heat and bits of leaves. Dessert was honey bread flats, crumbly from the crash but delicious, and washed down with sweet tea, which warmed them from the inside out. Harriet laughed. "Even now we have tea." "Well, we're not animals," huffed Felicity. "No offence," she added quickly, stroking Kinnapak's furry white head. Exhausted, the humans crawled into the root den, and the thought wolves became an insulating skirt at the bottom of the tree. They drifted to sleep in moments. 8 forest creatures snuggled into a nest. The dark night was only 3 chimes long, and Arthur woke to broad daylight and the soft clanks of Felicity cooking, the smell of porridge, and Harriet and Maudie talking coordinates. His iron arm was making the skin around his shoulder sore because he'd had it on for too long now, but there was no way he was undressing in the cold to take it off. The snow had stopped and left the trees heavy and the forest floor dense with fresh layer. Everything sparkled in the morning light. "Morning, Sleepy. We've been awake for ages. The thought wolves are hunting rodents, but they'll be back soon," Maudie said. "By ages she means moments," Felicity said, hugging Maudie to her. "Skartok says we'll be out of the forest by the end of the day," Maudie said. "That's brilliant. Have I got time to write before we leave?" he asked. Harriet replied that they did, so he took out her explorer journal and wrote several pages on the thought wolves. "You look happy," Harriet said. He was. They were so close to Dad's ship and the frozen lake now. The thought wolves returned and the humans quickly ate a lucky spoonful of porridge each, climbed back on their wolves, and were soon darting and dashing between pines once more. After half a day the forest thinned, and the trees was barren and withered, and was spread wider. The freezing wind picked up and slapped at their cheeks. Arthur rode Toyok close to his body, burying his face in his fur whenever he could to keep warm. Arthur's body jolted forward as the wolves came to an abrupt stop. Perinthia landed on a treetop not far away and screeched a mournful cry. The Thought-Wolves talked between themselves in hurried thoughts. "Bad snow, we can't go, we go round. What is it?" Arthur asked. A clearing could be seen through the trees ahead. The explorers climbed from the Thought-Wolves' backs, and the four of them walked closer. They were undulations covered by snow. At first Arthur thought they were natural mounds, but then he saw they were too regularly shaped and about the length of a person. His feet rooted to the earth and sickness churned in his throat. They looked like graves. Arthur sank to his knees before the first one, feeling numb. To think one could be his dad, buried in the cold earth with the rest of his crew. 13 of the poor things, Felicity said. They sat in silence before the graves. "Did you say 13? Arthur said suddenly, looking at Felicity. The Brightstorm crew had 14, and that included Dad. "You're right, Artie," Maudie said. "It makes sense," Felicity said. "Someone must have dug these graves." "Then who's missing?" said Harriet. Ooh.